So you guys open with this marvelous line that football is the new church, the players, the painters, and Diamantino is Michelangelo. But I thought cinema was the new church. Is that over?
Well, the inspiration for that opening is from a Foster Wallace text called Roger Federer as Religious Experience that was in the New York Times, I don't remember when. And he talks about Federer's way of playing and sports in general and how there's these aesthetic moments, these freeze frames of something that seems impossible for a human to do. And that before this was the place of art, whether in ancient Greek theater or in a Bernini sculpture that seems like it's carved by a laser, like it seems absolutely impossible that a human could carve such a perfect thing. And there was this shock of the technical proficiency, the hand of the artist that seemed to be doing something that was otherworldly or inhuman, that it was superhuman. And ever since the hand has disappeared from art with the conceptual turn or with modernism, that this shock of somebody achieving a technical feat to make something aesthetic has sort of disappeared, and sport sort of has replaced that. Where when Jordan's suspended in the air for what seems an impossible gravity-defying 10 seconds, or Ronaldo as well, he jumps like 2 meters in the air and manages to head the ball into the goal, or Wallace describes Federer like jumping 4 times backwards and hitting the ball behind his back in something that like makes him jump out of his chair and grunt, a primordial grunt of awe, of shock. And whether cinema is the new church, what attracted to me to cinema was that it was not the church. It was a muddy field, a mixed muddy field of an art practice. There's this text by Badiou that says the title "Cinema as Democratic Emblem," and it talks about film being a corrupt language, being a mixed language or a pidgin language. That's sound, image, music, acting. It's a potpourri of things that are going on, and so it's an incorrupt language and therefore low. It'll never be high culture, and that's actually what I love about cinema. And I think Daniel and I really love like pop culture and pop films and cinema in general. I think that's what's beautiful about it.
To go back to that Foster Wallace.
Sorry, that went on for way too long.
No, that was great. But that almost, the pleasure of that text, in a way, or what he's suggesting, almost makes me think that if you were getting pleasure from that, you'd want to do a film about a player playing versus a player at home. You know? Was that ever a tempting thing to be filming more game playing, more like physical activity versus the sort of celebrity side of football?
Cue's the second Foster Wallace text that we were referring to, which is another tennis text.
We're just ripping off Wallace.
I don't know which periodical, but yeah, much gratitude to him, which is called How Tracy Austin Broke My Heart, which is about this 14-year-old and 18-year-old prodigy tennis player that he grew up or was, a peer of, and he was always amazed by, and then finally, after her career had ended because of, a car crash or something, and she wasn't able to play as well, he saw that she had put out one of these like tell-all books, like How I Was So Great, and he reads it from beginning to end, and it's just completely innocuous. There's no I in team. My family's so important. Money's not
Teamwork's important.
Whatever. And he writes this beautiful thesis, which is something to the tune of what makes it possible for some of these great athletes, such as her, to perform
in front of 40,000 people
with such perfection is a sort of emptiness of the mind. And so we were fascinated with that in collision with
which he sees as tragic.
Yeah, he sees
that's why she broke his heart, is that it's like he was looking for the secret to genius, and the secret was emptiness, which is something that he couldn't get or something. And we thought this was really beautiful, and we thought it was a really good start for a character. This person who is brilliant, he's autistic, he's like Rain Man or like Forrest Gump or something. He's excels at some parts and then is totally incompetent at other parts of life.
And you speak of him as a character and as a fiction character. Do you see this as like a drama, in that he's playing a psychological role in this film?
For sure.
For sure, yeah.
For us, our interest was to make a character that could almost be mythical. That he is this perfect, godly, stud and genius player, but then that his interiority is a very beautiful, soft, caring, loving, open-hearted. He holds no stereotypes because he's almost too ignorant to have stereotypes, and that's, I think, where we took this emptiness, is that he's so empty that he is open to almost any, even the changes that his body goes through in the film. He reacts like anybody. He gets disturbed and sad, and he cries, and he's worried about what's going on with his body. But he also then accepts it quite openly in a way that I think a lot of other characters weren't. But yeah, we had a bunch of sports references like Lance Armstrong, Tyson, like the interviews based on Oprah's interview with Lance Armstrong. Like, she starts the interview saying, "We'll do everything yeses and nos," or whatever. And so we cited that.
That's how you should do your interview. Just yes and no.
Yeah, that would be
That's
much
like more
easier
my
for
speed.
And we made a composite of all these athletes and these beautiful dramatic moments, because I think that's what attracts us to sports, is the drama of it. It's as Greek tragedy. The end of the Euro Cup, where Ronaldo was taken off the field, and they had lit the lights in the stadium the night before, so it was full of moths. And as he's crying on the field, a little moth lands on his eyebrow, and it's just not even a reality TV show. Sometimes has stuff like this where you can't believe that a real thing's happening, but in sports, it's really you're shocked at this drama. So I think that's what attracts us to sports, is the psychology and drama behind it, not so much the competition. Maybe that's what makes the drama, but.
Are you guys football fans? I mean, you're Americans, so I'm a little skeptical of your passion, even if you do live abroad.
That's fair. I played soccer, as we call it in the United States, but growing up. But no, I don't think we're not super fans. He follows Benfica. I follow not the United States, because they don't. Yeah. I just root for whatever team is like the underdog. It's that kind of lazy proposal.
But we love watching.
But it's a great game to watch, and there is something.
We just don't know how much Nehemiah was bought for. That's not our scene.
One of the things I really admire about this film is it's sort of, I feel like this is a dirty word now, but artisanal quality. It really feels handmade and constructed, and almost in a way, not made up as it goes along, but it feels very free form, and that it incorporates a lot of elements organically. And I'm wondering how much of this project was sort of laid out in advance very formally, and how much of it was sort of a bricolage that formed itself as you sort of pieced it together.
Maybe sort of 50-50. The script is somewhat still evident there, and after we shot the film, which was kind of a fiasco of 5 weeks, we hadn't really ever done that kind of. All the previous films we'd done, we'd always sort of shot some, think about it, edit it. We're shooting on film, so you've committed something and you've spent people's time and money, and then gone back and shot some more. And this was kind of the producers were throwing you in, learn how to swim. And so after 5 weeks, we're well, fuck, we just made a turd of a film. And then as we kind of started sifting through the ashes, and we were dealing with some of the footage that we already had to assemble,
sifting through the ashes.
And that's what it genuinely felt like. As we were digging around in the rubble, there was a few things we had to already. We were primed to have to sort of construct in post, fix in post, which was the soccer games, the holograms, the dogs. Obviously, the dogs weren't filmed, or whatever at that scale. So we're constructing those things, and then we started to get more excited with the tools of bricolage. We used a lot of Getty images, a lot of.
Yeah, I think in the 90 minutes, there's probably 10 minutes of Getty images.
Oh my God, we have a big appetite for these images. I read some interview with Lucretia Martel recently, that the interviewer was what would you do if you started making films now? Tell a young filmmaker. She's I would just go on YouTube and just like cut together other people's videos. And I was like, yes, we're kind of in that like in-between place where, but he's really, I think he sees himself as not just an artist, but as an artisan. And so he's really one who drives both of us to kind of be like.
I see myself as an artisan.
I don't know. He's someone who's like, he learns how to paint, he learns how to do pottery, he learns how to do After Effects, and he's just like, so I think the film very much has a feeling of like, these guys learned how to use Maya in the middle of making this movie, or they learned how to like operate a drone, and that process of learning, hopefully, somewhat generous and interesting to the film, but.
For me, I really embrace amateurism. And that's how I started in film. I bought my 16 camera. It was like a Eclair ACL in 2006 as this dinosaur of a camera, and I learned how to load the thing, read the manual, etc. And I think that's how we made our first film, was with that camera, A History of Mutual Respect. And learning how to do these things, I think I was always a believer is that something new.
Talk about what is it? The Greek gods and the Joyce thing.
Oh yeah.
Just like enjoy.
Sure. But amateurism was always something that I really embraced, because I think a lot of inventions are not made by perfect planning. They're made by mistakes. Engineering inventions are made by mistakes, and it's the workshop and the laboratory of experimentation. And with After Effects, like the holograms in the film, I made them to sort of save a bit of money from the post-production budget. And I have fun. I go online, YouTube, and look for some tutorial After Effects, how to make a Iron Man hologram, Jarvis, you know? And then I learn how to do that, and I have fun. And I think that does make images that are far more surprising when you're not working in the traditional scheme of production, and you find new ways of doing things, and it becomes this bricolage, which I think also has some sort of warmness or humanity to it.
What definitely ties back to what you're saying about the question of sports, religion, cinema. It's like, sports really, they're not made out of mistakes. They're made out of excelling and doing the perfect even when the perfect seems impossible. And at least our cinema, and a lot of the cinema we like, is coming from mistakes, and we really respond well to working with, or we've always in all of our films been sort of working beyond the means of our budget, because we're so attracted to working with the Hollywood codes and those images, but there's never, you know, enough to actually make the dogs really feel real.
Yeah.
And
the thing he was saying about Joyce, it's a bit pretentious, but it's something I really like, which is there's a lot of citing of Orpheus as like the parent of the arts, or whatever, this singer poet who can move trees and rocks with like melodies from his harp. And Joyce picks Daedalus as his hero, which is actually not the artist or the poet, it's the guy in the workshop, and the guy who's experimenting, and that's where he saw his writing practice as a workshop, as a practice, rather than pure divine inspiration or something. And that's a metaphor that I really appreciate, and that I like, that poets or authors or filmmakers or painters, they're craftsmen. They're people who are experimenting. That's where something beautiful or new comes from. It's not from a divine moment or something.
And you guys have been working together for what seems probably to yourselves a while now.
Yeah.
In real human time, probably not that long at all.
In dog years.
Dog years.
We only operate in dog years.
Do you feel like your dynamic together is different now than with your first collaboration on set?
I mean, our first, we didn't know each other.
Is that right? You were like assigned together? How did that
No,
work?
we had a common. We had a common friend, and we were supposed to make a movie, all three of us, but the common friend bailed at the last minute, and so Daniel showed up to Brazil. I was already there to do history, and we had spent quite a bit of time together, but we weren't very close friends, so it was sort of like, okay, let's figure it out, and we're both the actors. There was some basic premise rules, like sort of dogma-inspired rules of, we'll be the actors, it's film, we've got this limited amount of film. And we got to know each other through that, and it was incredibly, like, it was a very beautiful experience for both of us, getting to know each other and becoming friends. And ever since then, we've been working now 10 years. I think that was 2009 that we shot it or something, or 2008, and we had been on a project together before in 2006, but that never came to fruition. But that was the beginning, is 2008. And since then, I mean, we became like best friends, and creatively, I think it's like a very symbiotic. People are always like, does Daniel do camera and you do writing?
Who's really doing what?
Who's the auteur here?
Exactly. And there's, it's a big mix, you know?
Yeah, but you spoke a lot about your sort of workshop approach and wanting to learn things, but what about yourself? Like, what attracted you to making this film from your side, or what did you most thrive working on?
I don't know. I mean, I think I take a lot of inspiration from Gabe's MO, and so I think I kind of live in the shadow or in excitement. But like
That's horrible.
I think I agree with him, and it's what were some other personal things? I don't know. In terms of our dynamic, he is someone who's like a bit more. I work with other people on other films, and he does likewise and his own things. But in terms of our own dynamic, he is the one who's kind of like pushing through crazy ideas, and I'm kind of like interested more in details of sort of like not correcting things or cleaning things up, but just sort of like. He sometimes is better at the big picture and I'm more at the detail level, but then we will switch at some sort of meaningful moment. But I think for this project, it was something that we've been working on for, I mean, we made it in 2 years. It had this sort of normal feature film gestation, but we were thinking of the ideas for this project since 2011 or whatever, and I think it's a culmination of all these different proposals and experiments that we'd been doing at a smaller scale together and apart on our previous films.
It's interesting you bring up the origins in 2011 because, I mean, obviously one of the most prominent motifs in the film is the connection of football's like image culture to like the rise of nationalism and presumably the U.S., but also directly in Portugal. Was that always a part of the project, or was that something that got built into it, the sort of conspiracy to use
it got built in recently.
Tool?
The film was always about, I think that's also a reason why we flipped genres so much from sci-fi to detective film, is we're always seeing the politics that are the bones of some kind of media or form of expression or genre, and before the film wasn't about soccer, but it was about something else, but it was the same thing, and the politics weren't about the rise of the extreme right, but it was a similar structure. The thing that's been the heart of the movie since the beginning was the adoption narrative, a rich icon adopting a refugee orphan, and that's been there since 2011 or 10, and then the icon changed, and the politics also that are the context for that changed.
But yeah, our focus has always been, I think, throughout all of our films, pop culture, the visual language of it, but also the multiple different spacing out. Anyhow,
political crises.
Political crises, and so we wanted to do something that was more topical, that really kind of focused in rather than these sort of broad trans-historical pieces that we had done. Something that really looked at like the multifarious like things that are like on your iPhone, you're just getting like 100 alerts of all these different things, and so dealing with any sort of pop cultural icon who would be at the sort of intersection of all of these things and would have some sort of weird, distorting quality with how all these things are sort of refracted or go through him or her was, I think, the impetus. So we had been looking at like Kardashian types and other icons, but when we
music
sort of
icons. And then we decided to make the film in Portugal. That was actually a late decision. And as soon as we thought of that, we were like, who is the pop icon that represents Portugal, and that would be a vessel for being a metaphor for that nation, and the soccer star was very quickly arrived at.
Where was it originally intended to be set?
In Haiti and Brazil.
Oh wow, okay.
Yeah, in 2010 after the earthquake.
Yeah. Okay, interesting. I mean, that sort of leads me to another question, which is going to sound very dry, but I think it's very interesting, especially from your guys' national background, which is making films outside the United States and sort of the funding opportunities that are available there that are not available as independent filmmakers in the U.S. because there aren't government bodies, for example, that provide state benefits, things like that. Can you talk about that? Is that something that you feel like has enabled you guys to pursue your filmmaking work
for this
abroad?
project, yeah, but the previous ones, no.
Yeah, I think this is the first, and you've had like 1 or 2 shorts or whatever, but this is that one project that we did it, and it was really great. It's I don't have any negative things or too negative things to say, but it is a bureaucratic system, so it's slow and
that's why it took so long as well.
but otherwise, it's like a very supportive and I think a nice risk that the cultural agencies or ministries take. I think it depends on each country and who's sort of in power. So I think that maybe
and things are changing as well, which is there's more and more pressure to have these publicly funded films be more for the people, for the taxpayers. And so there's fights in France and also in Portugal where there's a lot of pressure to not make films that are festival films or auteur films that are harder to access for the people who supposedly these films are paid by. But for us, it's very lucky. I mean, it's very lucky that we managed to make this film, through public funding in Portugal, France, and Brazil. And I think it would be very hard to make this kind of movie in the States. Just to explain, our short films we made for very low budget we won a prize for the first one, and that gave money for the second one. And the first one was also made from a prize from another one. So they were very low budget and basically privately funded by prize money that we were awarded.
Or a gallery would come in, or...
Yeah. And then this one, it has some challenges. You do have to deal with a lot more parties who have a lot more to say. But creatively, if the jury that funds your project says go ahead, you can do whatever you want. You have final cut or whatever, which is also different from a lot of the experiences of filmmakers in the States.
I think the jury from Portugal only gave us 2 notes, which was just like, brilliantly innovative, this is to the script, brilliantly innovative, seems totally unrealizable or whatever. And like, I don't know. I still don't know where we are with
seems
the
hard
project,
to make.
Yeah.
I guess maybe that'll bring me to the final question, which is you must tell me the origins of the pink clouds and the puppies. This question I'm sure everyone's asking and I need to know.
No one's asked.
Well, you must tell us.
We were trying to come up with some sort of visual way to show the emptiness of Tracy Austin. And I think the most like stupid cliche thing would be like this like black void like under the skin, like the soccer player like in turmoil, but that seemed like very dark and maybe too sexy or something. And I really like that Diamantino is a child, that he's like Candide, or I think that the character, the star that we most relate Diamantino to is Balthazar from Au hasard Balthazar. He's this innocent party to all the political pressures in a context. And in Balthazar, this donkey is like used for transporting illegal goods across borders. He's used to carry much weight for agriculture. He's used as a pet for like love and care. And everybody, all these different kinds of social pressures are acting upon this one innocent, beautiful, naive donkey. And Diamantino's sort of like our donkey. And so the puppies was a way to make him as pure as Balthazar. But I think that's...
I had wanted piglets, and I still want piglets. But...
And I think that's one of the most beautiful things of our collaboration, and this happens back and forth, which is in some of the films I've done by myself, and maybe Daniel as well with the ones he's done by himself, like I find it harder to risk. I'm scared of some of the ideas because they seem too stupid or not smart enough, I don't know. And the dogs, I was like, we love dogs and we love animals and like we find them fun, we love filming them. And I was like, what if when he's playing soccer and he's in his like beautiful utopic like visionary space, he's playing with huge puppies. And Daniel, and I thought it was a bad idea, I thought he was gonna veto it immediately. And Daniel was like, starts laughing, like, that is amazing, okay. And I think a lot of the riskier ideas or it's collaboration that makes it possible. It's this back and forth.
Yeah, I know I said that was the last question, but actually it brings up something that I think I always find really remarkable about your guys' work, which is that it's really intellectually rigorous, but it's also completely open to silliness. Not just like funniness, but like complete silliness.
Yeah,
and
yeah.
absurdity. And yeah, I mean, that's something you always want to put in these films that you work together, and this a comedy that sort of goes beyond comedy and courts ridicule and courts, you know, that kind of thing. That's attractive to you.
Yeah,
I think we don't see silliness and seriousness as being totally mutually exclusive, or like the intellect of play, I think, is really important to our films, and this was one of the more ludic films or whatever that we've made, I think, hopefully, but yeah.
Yeah, we love comedy, and we love how comedy is one of the most incisive way to talk about politics or to criticize what's going on in the world. And we see that a lot now with Trump, with all the comedy that's coming out with that. There's always this discussion of, is it actually making people more complacent because you laugh and so you accept it, so you don't go and vote or something like this? Some of my favorite films are political comedies, such as Underground by Kusarika I really love, or To Be or Not to Be by Lubitsch, a film that's about Hitler during World War II that got like panned because I think it was too of the moment. Or the biggest movie, the biggest inspiration that I think like talks about this is Sullivan's Travels, which is the comic director who wants to make a hard-hitting social drama to change the world, and finally at the end of the movie he understands that comedy is actually what can change the world. So I think that's why we embrace silliness, is we think that we see there's a power in that.